we've been learning about the laws of Zimun, and when a person, number one, if they came late to the meal, can they be mitzdaref? Can they join the other two people to do a zimun? And could they even lead the zimun? So if they came late after the other two people finished eating, can the third person who came late and he came after they finished and he's now eating, can he do a zimun, either join them or can he even lead the zimun? And the Gemara's conclusion is yes, he could even lead the zimun. And the reason behind it, the reason why he can join them has to do with the fact that they did, even though they finished eating, practically speaking, but theoretically speaking, they didn't finish eating, because if someone were to bring something that they like, and it says Shmuel enjoyed truffles and Rav enjoyed pigeon meat, and because if they brought those goodies for dessert, they would have continued eating, therefore their meal is not fully over. And the Gemara said that even they could even lead, the person who comes late could even lead the benching, and that's not a problem. He doesn't, even though he didn't really eat with them, but it seems like it's based on the same logic that if they were to bring more food, the other people would still be eating, and therefore he is considered to be eating the meal with them, and they could join together for a zimun. The Gemara now, we started the next little piece, and that has to do with the laws of Demai. And we were mentioning some of the technical rules. Demai is this food this produce that was bought from what's called an Am Haaretz, someone who's ignorant. And the law with the buying produce from someone who's ignorant, which we'll use the term Am Haaretz because we'll soon see that it's not necessarily the right term. That's a common term you use when you call someone an Am Haaretz. Like if you, if you hear someone give a lecture and they don't know certain things, the common term you use afterwards, that guy is an Am Haaretz. He doesn't know his stuff. He's an Am Haaretz. So it is commonly used, that term Am Haaretz. But in the Gemara, we're going to soon see that the word Am Haaretz does have different meanings. The rabbis debated what it refers to, and regarding which laws. There's an Am Haaretz regarding the laws of Zimun. There's an Am Haaretz regarding the laws of Tumah. That, do you consider this, if he touched it, do you consider it questionable if it is pure or impure because this person touched it? So that person would be the person that we're not sure we can trust them, they're called the Am Haaretz. So here we're talking about this Am Haaretz. And we bought produce from him. We don't know if he took the tithings. We do know that he took truma, because everyone takes truma. So that we're not concerned about. But we are concerned that he didn't separate meiser. And the most important part of separating meiser is the truma that's inside the meiser that's supposed to be taken from the Levi. That is what we're concerned about. That if he didn't separate the meiser, then he also didn't separate that extra type of truma, because people don't really know about that truma, or they're not so careful about it. They're not familiar with the importance of it. They know the regular truma you have to separate, but they don't know about this additional truma that also carries with it very severe penalty. And so ultimately, the law is that the rabbis made a decree that we have to separate this meiser and truma, and mainly for the truma part, you separate meiser, and then you don't give the meiser to the Levi, but you then separate this extra truma, and that you give to the kohen. We discussed it yesterday that really you should be able to sell it to the kohen, but for various reasons, you don't sell it to the kohen, you give it to the kohen. And the reason why I say you could sell it is because logically, you don't know that it wasn't taken. Majority of Amei Haaretz do separate meiser also. But the rabbis made a decree that we have to go beyond the doubt, and we have to, in this scenario, we're supposed to cover ourselves more, and therefore we do separate it, and we give the truma, this extra truma, to the kohen. Now, the case here we're talking about is that this guy did not separate from the demai. He didn't separate this extra truma piece to give to the kohen, and instead he baked bread out of it, and he had a good loaf of bread. And now he wants to bench with a zimun, and you were eating with him, and you don't know if you can join him in with your zimun because he was eating treifa food, so considered like non-kosher. I mean, he ate something he wasn't allowed to. So the Gemara's answer to this problem was, well, it wasn't 100% treif. Why not? Because the person who ate it sometimes is allowed to eat that type of food. It's not really treif. It's a somewhere in the middle. It's a stage where we're not 100% sure it's treif. And the rabbis permitted it in certain scenarios. There are scenarios where it is permitted. A similar thing to this we find with regard to the laws of pas palter, bread made from a non-Jewish baker, that in locations where the rabbis ruled that you're really supposed to only eat bread from a Jewish baker. But in places, in other words, you're supposed to have bread baked by a Jew. It's called pas Yisrael. Now, in locations where you can't get it, there is a leniency that, according to some, the rabbis didn't prohibit such bread because bread is a staple food. They allowed the person to eat it even in, even though it's baked by a non-Jew. And that's why you'll find an OU on many of the breads, even though they are not baked by Jews, like Arnold's rolls. They are not pas Yisrael. But if you are in a place that doesn't have pas Yisrael, there's definitely room for leniency. I'm not saying everyone agrees with this view, but there is definitely room for leniency. And therefore, the OU will give their supervision. They wouldn't give a supervision on it if you weren't allowed to eat it. Even if the ingredients are kosher, but you're not allowed to eat it, the OU would not give their stamp. They're giving their stamp based on the fact that there is a leniency that you don't need to have pas Yisrael for that product. Now, if you want to rely on that leniency, there is definitely a leniency there. If you want to rely on that, that's dependent on you and your custom and your tradition and so on. But there's definitely a leniency to have such a product. Now, the same thing is here. Demai is prohibited. No one is allowed to have it. But there are scenarios where it is permitted. I shouldn't say no one's allowed to have it, but the rabbis made a rule that you're not allowed to have it. But there is a scenario where it is permissible. Where is that? If a person is poor, or if there's an army that needs food, and that you're obligated to give them, you're responsible to provide for them. So therefore, you would be allowed to feed them demai, but not tevel, not food that was definitely truma wasn't taken from. But you could give them demai, which is this questionable food that the rabbis made a decree that you're supposed to separate, but you don't have to in these scenarios. For a poor person, he's allowed to eat it without separating. And the aksanya, which is this army, which we discussed that it might be considered, they might be talking about a Jewish army or could be talking about a non-Jewish army, but basically they would be allowed to have this. So therefore, the point is that a person could do a zimun on such bread. If so one person ate this bread, and he wasn't poor, he could still do a zimun with the other people. Why? He was not allowed to eat this bread. He's not poor. But the answer is he could be mafkir his possessions. Mafkir means he could make ownerless. He could make ownerless his possessions. According to Jewish law, there's a concept called hefker, where a person could say, I am mafkir. A person could say that he's mafkir everything that he owns. And then, he tells that in front of three people or two other people, and they, I think it's three people. And maybe, I'm not sure if he's counted as one of them, but bottom line is, he does a hefker, and if he does that, then he becomes considered poor, and then he's eligible to eat this demai. And because he has that option, therefore, we can't call this food that it's a mitzvah haba ba'aver. We wouldn't be able to call this food that he's doing a mitzvah. At the same time, he's doing that it's an avera, meaning it's a sin. In other words, he's saying a bracha or doing a zimun on food that's prohibited. You wouldn't call it that because he has that ability to make it permissible. Therefore, you couldn't call it such a food mitzvah haba ba'avera. We also explained that there is another way of learning, and that has to do with the fact that zimun, the problem with having this non-kosher food called demai, is that you don't consider yourself eating a meal, an official meal, when you're eating non-kosher food. However, because you have the ability to make this kosher, therefore doesn't have that, because some people eat it and it's permissible, and you could make it permissible for yourself. So therefore, there could be considered a kvius. You could have a official meal on this type of food because it's not completely non-kosher. You yourself might even be able to eat it in a certain scenario. So therefore, it is permissible. So we gave two understandings of the Gemara's answer, how to understand the Gemara's answer. Yes, Yehuda.
So if you make it hefker, so how do you get it back?
Well, the official concept of hefker is that really you don't. People might take it.
Right.
Anyone can take it.
Anyone can take it, especially the people that are standing next to you and you thought they were your friends. But when you make it hefker, all of a sudden you find out who your friends are. And some of them pretend that they're still friends. They said, listen, someone else was going to get it, so I was doing so I took it. At least your friend got it. Yes, Mordechai.
But
I'm sorry, Yehuda. You didn't finish. Yeah, Yehuda.
Yeah, I don't understand why somebody would do that.
So this is the thing. We're not saying that practically someone would do that, but what we are saying is that we're not going to call this a definite sin, because theoretically you could eat this in a permissible way. Because it could be eaten in a permissible way, it's not considered a mitzvah haba ba'avera, that you're sinning by saying a bracha and doing the zimun on this type of food, because it's not a definite sin. It's a way out.
Once it's done, it's not a sin. It was not a sin.
If you would do it, right? If you would do this, it's not. Therefore, even if you don't do it, it's not a full-fledged sin with a mitzvah, with a zimun. Yes, Mordechai.
Yes, I'm also reminded of. When you said about mitzvah, I'm also reminded of that. There's a thing that if there's a poor person who has 199 coins, and you come along and give him another coin to make it 200, and he can no longer collect the things that poor people are entitled to.
Right. What does the Gemara call that? A chassid shaita? Is that called a chassid shaita?
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't get it.
Mordechai is reminding us of a Gemara. There's a Mishnah or a Gemara. The Gemara mentions that a person who he thinks he's being nice, but he's really being terribly mean. Is a person is considered poor if they only have 199 zuz. Because 200 zuz, you're already not poor. But if you have only 199, you're considered poor. So what happens if a person has 199 zuz and you want to give them 1,000 zuz? Would it be charitable? Yes, because he's poor. Whatever you give him is charity. What happens if you give him 1 zuz? Now you've made him not poor anymore, and he now cannot collect any money. So what you've done is hurt him by giving him that 1 zuz, because someone else might come around with 500 zuz and want to give him a nice donation. And you now ruined it for him because you gave him that 1 zuz. So that's called a chassid shaita. Anyways, the laws of being the rules of being poor and who's eligible for charity.
Before you give somebody a zuz, you should ask him how much you have.
Nowadays, the amount of money that it would be to be poor, it's sort of a little different nowadays. You know, if you don't have a few $1,000, you're probably considered poor. So it's a little different than the 200 zuz. Yes, Susan.
Okay, my question was, how many times can you give and take back? And that was already answered, that you can only do it 1 time. When you give all your stuff away, it's gone. Correct?
Well, we didn't say that you cannot then take it back.
Claim it. You can reclaim it?
If nobody took it, you could.
Everyone's eligible to take it. Whoever wants can go and take it. But if you take it back, remember, you aren't eligible for your demise. So you got to eat your lunch. You're eating your demise.
And then
you'll
But
see
how
if no one
many
took
times
it.
how many times can you do that? Every day? No, can't be. Can't be, right?
I mean, how many times can you put money in your bank?
Never.
How many times are you allowed to put money in your bank account? As
But I
often as you
never
want.
do. I
How
never
many
have
times can you take money out of your bank account? How many times can you give a gift to your friend? As often as you want. How many times can you rip up a dollar bill? You can
Okay.
do whatever you want. You do whatever you want. I mean, you can do it a million times.
So
No
it's
problem.
not- What you're saying is that it's not a hard and fast rule.
Yeah, it's making yourself own. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing, there's no big deal. You give it away, you make it ownerless. You could stick it in front of your house and say, goodbye, anyone wants this can take it. You put a sign up and say it's free, free for all. I don't know, you put it on offer up and say
I
it's free.
see.
I don't know.
Okay, now I get
Whatever
what
you want to do, you do.
I couldn't understand what you were talking. Now I get it.
This is not a major insight of Judaism. This is
Okay.
anyone can make something ownerless.
I see.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So bottom line is we got to continue here. So we have the next Gemara. The next Gemara is Ma'aser Rishon Shnitla Trumas, and that's where we got stuck in the middle. Okay, so let's start this again. Ma'aser Rishon Shnitla Trumas. We are maybe 10 lines up from the bottom of the page. 10 lines up from the bottom of the page. Ma'aser Rishon Shnitla Trumas. This is another example of doing a zimun. Even though you're doing something on food that's seemingly prohibited, but you would be allowed to do a zimun. What is this? This is called Ma'aser Rishon that truma was taken from. And the Gemara, of course, asks Pshita, and that's the right after the two dots over there. Pshita, this is obvious. Of course, you could do a zimun on food that was taken, the truma was taken from. What's wrong with that? The Gemara answers, like Shmicha, it's not needed to tell us this law except for a case, Bishibalim, that that the owner, when he gave this meiser, he gave the meiser to the Levi before it was obligated in truma and meiser, which means he gave it while it was still in the store. And because he gave it early, the law is v'hifresh mimenu trumas meiser v'lehifresh mimenu truma gedolah. And the Levi separated the trumas meiser from it. And he knew that you don't separate the main truma from it. He knew that he knew that truma was not separated from it before because he took it in stalks, and yet he only separated the truma that's called trumas meiser, but he didn't separate the original truma, which is supposed to be given to the kohen 2%. He didn't give that. He didn't separate the main truma. He only separated his trumas meiser, and because of that, this is a scenario where he has food that he had meiser. The meiser is separated. The trumas meiser is separated, but the main truma was not separated. And this could be thought of as something prohibited. And the Mishnah is telling us, no, it's not a problem. You could even do zimun. Now, what is the explanation? Like Rabbi Avo says. Like Rabbi Avo says, Reish Lakish, in the name of Reish Lakish, Ma'aser Rishon Shektima B'Shabalim Pater, the Ma'aser Rishon, this first tithing that was done early, that the Levi got it, and he received it early while it was in its stalk form, and Pater mi Truma Gedolah. He is exempt from Truma Gedolah. He is exempt from giving them the original Truma that should have been taken beforehand, except for the fact that the obligation of Truma never applied to this earlier because he took it so early. It was before it was made into a pile of kernels. It was stalks still. And Shenemar and Rabbi Avo says that it's putter from Truma Gedolah because Shenemar, as it says, that you're supposed to take from the tithe. You're supposed to take a Truma for Hashem, which is 1/10 of the 10th. Meiser min ha-meiser, 1/10 of the 10th, which means that the Levi got 1/10 of your produce, and he now gives 1/10 of that, which means that if you had 100 cases and you gave him 10 cases, and each case has 10 stalks, let's just say, each. So now he gives, so he now has 10 cases. He's got to give one case to the kohen. Now, really, there should have been more given to the kohen because there's the 2%. But now he gives this one case to the kohen. It's one out of his 10. It's a 10% out of what he received, out of the 10th of what was the original 10th of the produce. So meiser min ha-meiser amarti lecha, you have to give a 10th of a 10th. That's what I told you to give, that the Levi has to give a 10th of his 10th. V'loi truma gedola, trumas meiser min ha-meiser, but you don't give both. You don't give the truma gedola and the trumas meiser from the meiser. So this is a scenario where you would think that it's prohibited, and the Gemara says we learn from a verse that you actually don't even have to give the other separation. So what comes out from this mission is not that you're doing some type of sin, but it's not a terrible sin. Comes out that it's not a problem at all. In fact, what you did was right because he took it early. That's what ends up happening is you end up going around getting out of the original truma. Now, is this preferable to take the meiser early? No, this is not the preferable way to separate. You're not supposed to find this loophole, but there is such a option, which is there is such a scenario where you are exempt from the original truma. Now the Gemara says, "Amalei Rapapa Abaye." Rapapa told Abaye, "Yihachi, if so, afilu hikdima bakri nami." Rapapa tells Abaye, "What happens if by mistake you made a pile, you made the whole pile, and you gave first to the Levite before you gave the kohen his stuff? So really now you're obligated in taking truma. First, you should give the kohen 2%. Then you should take what's ever left and you give the Levite 10%. And what did you do? By mistake, you gave the Levite first. So you gave the Levite first. Now, what happens in this scenario? The Levite gives 10% of what he received to the kohen. But what about the original truma? The original truma was never removed. Again, we have two cases. One case is where the Levite got his stuff early. He got it early, meaning before it's obligated in separating truma and meiser. Why was it early? Because it's still in its stalk form. What happens if it's not in its stalk form? The other scenario is where he got it in its kernel form and it's in piles. If you get it in piles in the kernel form where it's obligated already in Truma Gedola, what are we going to say there? When the Levi gets it first by mistake, in other words, it's not supposed to be done this way, but the Levi got it first now, and he separates his Trumas Meiser, he separates the portion that he's supposed to give to the kohen. What about the original Truma that was never separated, that you forgot to separate? What are you going to say there? The same verse implies like you're exempt in that scenario also. So why are we saying that it's only talking about where you did it before it was obligated in Truma, even after it's obligated in Truma? The verse seems to imply that once you have Meiser, you only give one Truma. You don't give two Trumas. So who cares when you got the Meiser? The Meiser was before it was in its kernel form and it's piled up nicely, or after it's in its, before that, after, it doesn't matter. You should be exempt in all scenarios because the verse that we're learning from, it seems to imply all scenarios, you only give one Truma from Meiser. You don't give two. So the Gemara says, even if you gave the Levi earlier, but after it was already made into a pile, Nami, the same law should apply from that verse. Amar le, alecha amar kra. So Abaye answered back that you can't say that because on this, the verse says that Mikol Meiser Sechem, from all your Meiser Tarimu, you should give. So we have one verse that implies you have to give Truma from all the Meiser, which implies that any type of Truma that might be there, you have to give. And on the other hand, we have a verse that says you only give one Truma. So we have to say one must be talking about before it was obligated in giving truma, where the Levite got it, and the other was talking about after it was obligated in truma, that the Levite received his portion mistakenly, and there you would be obligated in giving the portion to the kohen that was supposed to be given earlier. Umaro Isa, the Gemara asks, who says this way is this and that way is that? Maybe do it the opposite. Maybe if you already made a pile of it, then we'll say, oh, you already made a pile and you gave to the Levi. You're free from giving to the kohen. Let's say it that way. And if you didn't make a pile of it, still in its stalk form, if it's still a stalk form, then yeah, you got to still give to the kohen. Maybe say the opposite. My answer is high idgan, high loy idgan. Logically, it would make sense that one was exempt in the other because it was not made into high idgan. This is made into a pile already, and it became obligated in it. And therefore, we never removed the obligation. And the other one was never obligated in the first place. Therefore, it makes sense to exempt that one. So logically, that would be the one to choose to exempt, and the other one wouldn't be the one to exempt. So bottom line is that there are scenarios. There is a scenario where if you did take Meiser before Truma, you separated Meiser before Truma, that the Levi does not have to make up that Truma and give it to the kohen. He has to give Truma from Meiser, but he doesn't have to give the original Truma that you skipped out on. When does that apply? Only in one scenario where he got it before it was really obligated in separating the titles. Susan, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. How do you tell the difference in this country between a Levite and a Kohen?
There is no way. Some people know that they're Levites and Kohens, and some people don't. But we don't give the Kohens nowadays the
We
Truma.
don't.
No, it's an oral tradition, Susan. It's an oral tradition.
Yeah, but it's not applicable because the Kohen doesn't get the Truma nowadays. Because
And in Israel, is it different in Israel?
no, they don't get it. You separate it, but you don't give it to the Kohen. And the reason is because it would have to be eaten in holiness, and we don't have that level of holiness nowadays.
Right.
And we don't know for sure that we assume we're Kohanim or Levites, but we don't have that same tradition either about who is really a Kohen, who is really a Levi. So therefore, this law doesn't we don't
Doesn't
do
apply.
it. We aren't able. It applies, but we aren't able to fulfill it. So we separate that portion, but we just get rid of it. Just like the women who bake challah.
Oh,
Did you ever bake challah? What do you do with the challah? Do you give it to the kohen? No, you burn it, right? You separate a piece and then you burn it. Really, you should be giving that to the kohen. That's part of his what he's supposed to live on. Instead, the kohen's running around trying to make a living. He should be eating your challah. But the thing is that he can't. He's not holy. We don't know. He doesn't know for sure that he's a kohen. We assume we have tradition that we're kohenim, but we don't have the same level of tradition of confidence. And therefore, bottom line is that we burn it. Okay. Yes, Ben.
I wanted to say in those times, if they made a mistake and gave the Levi first, in best scenario, he would get 99% of what he deserves. In worst scenario, he'll get just 1/10 of a tenth, which is really a bad situation.
You're saying the kohenim have a hard time making a living.
Right. Because, the
gotta
guy
be
that made a
thankful.
mistake should pay for it,
You got to be thankful you're an Israelite or a Levite.
Right.
Okay. But let's try to do one little piece over here. Meiser Sheni Behegdish Shenitu.
Rabbi, Simone has a question. Rabbi.
Oh, Simone, I'm sorry. Yes, Simone.
Yeah, so question, does it matter if the Israel does this intentionally or unintentionally, taking out the part for the Kohen? And does the Levi always know that it was or wasn't taken out for the Kohen? How does those two things work?
So think about it. If the Levi gets it when it's in stalk form, then you got to start questioning because he's getting it when it's not really obligated and being given to him. So it's something is wrong there. So that's when you have to start questioning why, was the truma taken? It wasn't obligated to be taken. But if he gets it in the normal form, so then everyone separates truma. There's no reason to assume not that way, and it's obligated in separating truma. So that would be a good sign. Good, it would be a good red flag.
So then you're saying that the Israel is intentionally not separating out the portion for the Kohen.
I didn't say that. I just said that you have to start questioning. Maybe they're going to forget. Maybe they did forget. It doesn't matter. I mean, in that scenario, he actually doesn't have to worry about it. But that would be a case where he might want to remind the guy before he takes it and say, this is not appropriate, because according to some Rishonim, they mentioned that this is not the right thing to do, that you shouldn't do it, even though legally you get away with it, but it's not the appropriate thing to do. I think the Meiri brings that down, that it's like not the appropriate thing to do, even though it seems like it fits the laws, you sort of get around the rules, but this is not, but actually there's a verse that says you're not allowed to separate, you have to separate in a certain order. I guess the question is, because the reason you might think differently, because maybe now it's not obligated. So you would say, well, I'm not obligated. Maybe I can get around that. I'm not separating in the wrong order. I'm not obligated in the other truma. But the thing is that it's mentioned that this also is included, and basically it's prohibited to do initially to get around this. And therefore, you would want to remind, the Levi probably should remind the guy and say, you're really not supposed to do this. You should separate the truma first.
And when the Levi gets it in piles, is he supposed to make an assumption that the Kohen's portion was already taken, or that's something he has to question also?
I don't think he has to ask. I've never seen anything that, you have to suspect. I think if he asks, the guy says, listen, I'll give it to someone else if you don't trust me. Okay, so, okay, let's try to do one more piece. Meiser Sheni Hegdish and Niftu. Yeah, Meiser Sheni and Hegdish that was redeemed. So the Gemara asks, Shita, of course, it was redeemed. What's wrong with eating Meiser Sheni? Meiser Sheni is you eat in Yerushalayim, and if you didn't eat it, if you can't carry it to Jerusalem, you redeem it. And so now you have oranges. You're supposed to bring them to Jerusalem. The problem is it's too heavy. So what do? You redeem the 100 oranges for a $100 bill, and now you have the 100 oranges. You're eating them in this, and you're eating them with your friends, and they're doing a zimun. You want to join them, but now were you allowed to eat this outside of Yerushalayim? Yes, you were allowed to eat it outside Yerushalayim. You redeemed it already. You redeemed it on the $100 bill. The $100 bill you're going to bring to Jerusalem next week, and you're going to have something nice over there in Jerusalem. Now you're eating these oranges, and your friends made hamaitzi and had bread and so on. You want to join them for a zimun. What's the problem? You redeemed, you ate stuff. You ate Meiser. Was this Meiser Sheni what you ate? Yes, but it was redeemed. There was a orange that was. You gave the $100, but you're supposed to redeem it with an extra additional fifth, which is really a fourth. You're really supposed to make it $125, and you didn't do the fifth. So this teaches us that the extra fifth doesn't mess up your redemption, and it's fine to eat it. Doesn't mess up you eating it. You ate it. You can do a zimun together with the other people. Okay, we're gonna stop here. Sei gesund.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.